Quick, choose a meal deal with McValue. The $5 McChicken meal deal, the $6 McDouble meal deal, or the new $7 Daily Double meal deal. Each with its own small fries, drink, and 4-piece McNuggets. There's actually no rush. I'm just excited for McDonald's. For a limited time only, prices and participation may vary. Not valid for McDelivery.
Dentistry is changing fast. Keeping track has never been harder. That's why you have to check out the Thank You for Flossing podcast. It comes from the Association of Dental Support Organizations and delivers unfiltered conversations with executives, innovators, and clinicians driving the industry forward. From DSOs and innovation to workforce and policy, it's the smart listen for dental professionals who want to stay informed and ahead of the curve. Search Thank You for Flossing and subscribe today.
RingCentral's AI receptionist uses voice AI to answer on the first ring, so you'll never miss a call again. In just a few minutes, you can personalize your own AI receptionist to answer questions, route calls, schedule appointments, and even send texts in multiple languages. Plus, it's easy to scale. Create unlimited AI receptionists across any phone system. It's all powered by one reliable platform for effortless AI communications. See for yourself at ringcentral.com. RingCentral, voice of your business.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to Kilowatt, a podcast about electric vehicles, renewable energy, autonomous driving, and much, much more. My name is Bodie, and I am your host. And on today's episode, we have it's huge. It's a huge episode. Over 6 pages of notes. This one's going to be a long one for sure. A couple of things, though. And I have 4 different things that I want to talk about that are sort of show related and sort of not. The first thing is we have a new Patreon supporter, and that is Dean. So I want to welcome Dean to the Patreon community. I've had the pleasure of interacting with Dean several times, and I have found him to be thoughtful. He gives constructive criticism, and honestly, everything that we've interacted on, I have taken to heart and made little tweaks or even outright changes, not changes, corrections. So thank you again, Dean, for supporting the show. It really does mean a lot. If you would like to be like Dean and many others, you can go to supportkilowatt.com and you can choose to sign up for Patreon, or if you don't like Patreon for some reason, you can sign up for Supercast, and for as little as $1, you can support the show. Okay. Next up, I have a little bit of exciting news, and I'm going to try to keep this really concise just because I can blather a little bit more than I need to. But we are a part of the Believe podcast network, and Kilowatt is not the only automotive podcast. There are several automotive podcasts on the Believe network, and we're going to do an ad swap with the Consumer Guide Automotive Car Stuff podcast, which is hosted by Tom Appeal and Jill Simonello. Hopefully I said Jill's last name right. I practiced, and hopefully I said it correct. But as you can imagine, they talk about car stuff. They talk about electric cars, classic cars. They have all sorts of different guests. And I would highly encourage you to go and listen to their podcast because a couple different reasons. The last episode they did, they talked about understanding the software-defined vehicle, which I don't know how you can get. I know that ICE cars are software defined, but EV cars are definitely software defined. And the one before that, they talked about the more affordable Cybertruck, but they also talked about Japanese K cars, which I honestly think those are super cool. And I am starting to see more and more of that style of tiny vehicle in the area that I live in. And some of them are right-hand drive vehicles, which I think is even more interesting. But that's not all, because we're also doing an ad swap with the Final Lap Weekly podcast, which is a NASCAR talk show. And a lot of you may or may not know this, but back in the day, I was a NASCAR fan. And I was a NASCAR fan for one very good reason. And his name was, well, I won't give his name. He was I worked with this guy. He was a huge NASCAR guy. He also loved the Oakland Raiders. And if his driver was in a position that he wanted him to be in, or if the Raiders were ahead, or making a comeback, you were not allowed to get up out of your seat. He's very superstitious, but I love this guy. We worked together at the first fire department that I worked at, and I learned a lot about NASCAR. This is like Jeff Gordon days. And then after that, I just never really worked with anybody that watched a whole lot of NASCAR other than one other instance. But yeah, back in the day, I had a lot of fun just hanging out and fond memories just hanging out and watching NASCAR. So that show is hosted by Carrie Murphy and Toby Christie. And interesting enough, Carrie has a podcast, well, a YouTube channel about electric vehicles, and it's called Whooshin'. And I'm gonna put a link to the show notes, in the show notes for his podcast. But he has a new Tesla Model Y, the Juniper version. So he talks about FSD. He talks about other electric vehicles. But really, like, if you want a good companion show to this show, obviously the Final Lap is a good place to go if you're interested in racing. But if you would like some more EV content from a different perspective, check out Whooshin', hosted by Kelly Murphy. All right. So I have other things to tell you, but we're 5 minutes in, and I really need to get to the show. Otherwise, we're going to have people start tuning out. So let's start with today we're going to start with our Tesla news, and then we'll work our way to our EV news. Like I said, I have lots of news. The other two other things that I'm going to tell you, I'll sprinkle that in throughout the show. I won't make you listen to it all at once. We'll be here for a long time. All right, starting with our first Tesla story. And you know what? Here's what I wanted to do for today. I feel like, or at least the show, I feel like I've been reporting a lot of negative stories or talking about a lot of negative articles when it comes to Tesla. So I genuinely tried to pick articles that were interesting, but didn't have too much of a negative slant. Some of them do, but in general, I wanted to make sure that, I don't have negative feelings per se about Tesla. And I feel like maybe some of my choices in articles are pointing that direction, but I really don't. As a matter of fact, today I had to take my car in because there was a squeaking in the back. The back headrest on the driver's side was squeaking, and I couldn't, raise or lower it. It was just like stuck. And I created my service request on the app. They said, it could cost $235 or it could be free if it was covered under the warranty, but they couldn't tell me if it was covered under the warranty until after they got a look at it. So, and I was going to have to leave it there for a day overnight. So I took my car in a little bit early, about an hour and a half earlier than my appointment. And my plan was just to leave it there and then go home in an Uber because it didn't qualify for a loaner vehicle. I went and I parked, and I wasn't able to park in the normal spot that I park in. So I just, went in and told the service guy, I was like, hey, I reported 2 problems. The first problem isn't an issue anymore, so don't worry about that. The second problem, I explained it a little bit more in detail, and I said, I'm parked over here because I couldn't find another parking spot. The guy was very nice, joking around, very pleasant to interact and deal with. And I was like, yeah, I'll be back tomorrow. And he was like, nah. He's like, you don't have to come back tomorrow. He's like, we'll get that in right now. So I was there an hour and a half early. And he says, I'll take care of it right now. This is something that's super quick. You can wait if you want to. And I was like, okay, I'll wait, and expecting for them to come out eventually and tell me, well, we're going to need you to go ahead and go home because it won't be done until tomorrow. So that was my expectation. I was there for about 2 hours. I wasn't expecting to do anything, so I just brought my phone and headphones because I thought I was coming straight home. There was lots of work I could have done on my laptop, but I didn't have it with me. But I was there for about 2 hours. They fixed the problem. They didn't charge me anything, which was great. And like I said, my appointment was at 2:30, and I was gone by 3. So I got there right before 1 and gone by 3. I can't complain about that customer service. And he even said, the service rep said, he's like, he goes, so you know what, I should have probably charged you for this, but it wasn't a big deal. So, have a good day. And I drank 2 of their LaCroix and 1 of the waters that I brought. So I feel like I got one over on Tesla. But anyway, the whole reason why I'm telling that story is because I feel like I've presented Tesla in a fairly negative light recently, and that's not necessarily my fault. It's just those are the stories that are being told. But I wanted to put a little positivity in there. So let's start off here. We talked about the affordable Cybertruck, and we talked about how it was $59,000, almost $60,000, but it was going to go up. Well, we now know what that price is. After 10 days, it went up 17%, and you can now pick it up for $69,990, so $70,000 for this vehicle. I'll be interested to see how many they sold at the $60,000 price versus how many in 10 days versus how many they're going to sell at the $70,000 price in 30 days. I would bet that the 10 days probably got a little bit more traction. Next up, sometime in mid-2026, Tesla will start selling the Model 3 and Model Y in Morocco. This will be the first African country where Tesla is officially sold. I think this is amazing. Based on its proximity to Europe, Morocco makes a lot of sense. Tesla is opening or already has opened 6 supercharger stations in Morocco. Like Europeans can, ferry their not only Teslas, but whatever electric car they have, they can ferry that over to Morocco and drive around. So yeah, this is really cool. And now Morocco is going to be supported not only by those 6 supercharger stations, I'm sure there's more to come, and they're going to have a dealership and service centers. So I think that's fantastic. And I've always wanted to go to Morocco. It's one of my bucket list countries to go to. And I had a chance when I was in Spain, but that would have meant that I had to leave my family and extended family. This was a long time ago. I would have had to leave my family and extended family and then take a train down to southern Spain and then take a ferry across to Morocco. And let's just say it wasn't everyone's favorite plan, except for mine. I was the only one who thought that was a good idea. Elon says that full self-driving could be in the Netherlands as soon as March 20th, 2026. Honestly, Elon says a lot of things. But he also shared that date was shared with Tesla by local authorities in the Netherlands. So there's a good chance that this one is actually true. Hopefully it is. Fingers crossed. Tesla full self-driving now has this really cool feature, according to Teslarati. If FSD is activated and the car detects that there's an aggressive driver behind you tailgating you, FSD will pull over and let the driver pass by. So the video that I saw is what looks like it might have been in like California, but it was this 2-lane road. One side has a cliff and the other side just is there hanging in the air, as Arlo Guthrie said in the Motorcycle song. But the car's driving along and there's somebody behind them that's tailgating, and there's a pull off, and the car pulled off and waited for that aggressive driver to pass and then entered the road again. I thought that was pretty cool. First of all, FSD was handling that road fantastically. You can be forgiven to be a little nervous, especially like if anybody's ever traveled in like the Lake Tahoe area on the southern side of Lake Tahoe. Some of those switchbacks are scary, even in the daylight in the summertime. This wasn't quite to that level, but it was a difficult road to navigate for sure. And FSD seemed to handle it just great, according to the Teslarati video that I saw. So I think that's cool. And I think it's also needed. We don't need to cause more road rage incidents because the car isn't recognizing those social cues, right? This is one of the things that I've talked about over and over and over again is for autonomous driving to be successful is we have to be able to interact with them in a way that we interact with humans. Just like when we're at a 4-way light and you can maybe pull up the same time as somebody else who's to your left or to your right. Now there is an actual way to handle this, but there are times like when you pull up to those stops and you're not quite sure who is there first. You look to your left or you look to your right and you make eye contact with that driver, and then somebody will either go or give the wave for you to go, right? We don't have that with autonomous cars, so it makes it a little bit more difficult. Obviously, if somebody's tailgating you, the thing that you would do as a driver is eventually, when you got to a safe point, you would move over so that they could pass you because they are clearly more important than you and need to get down the road. And you're just inconveniencing them. So, I think this is good. Tesla has expanded full self-driving trials in Abu Dhabi. When I say full self-driving trials, that does not mean that anybody can go out, purchase full self-driving, and then use it. That means that there are human test drivers on public roads. These are trained drivers. So far, this is not for the general public, but I would imagine in, a fairly short amount of time from now, Tesla will be able to extend full self-driving supervised to the folks who live in Abu Dhabi, another country that I would really like to go to. Next up, Tesla is building out its mega charger network for the Tesla Semi. Now we have the superchargers for, us regular folk, and then the mega chargers are what's supposed to fill up the semi trucks relatively quickly. There are 64 locations that have been chosen. They're strategically positioned throughout the United States. Not all of them have been built yet, but they're definitely putting that infrastructure in place so that the Tesla Semi will be able to move about the country. As Southwest is, that's their tagline. You are now free to move about the country. One of the things that I did a week ago, or maybe it's even closer to 2 weeks now, is I had the opportunity to go to a training that was put on by Tesla for firefighters. And one of the things that we were told that would be there for us to look at was the Tesla Semi. And that's not the only reason I went, because I wanted to go and talk about the mega packs and things like that. And I did. Had those opportunities. And I'm putting together some training for work. But I wanted to be able to see the Tesla Semi and maybe the Cybercab, because, the Cybercab is going to start operating in Tempe and Scottsdale, from my understanding, soon. And neither the Semi or the Cybercab were there, but they did say that one of the things that they were going to do is they'd bring it, once those vehicles were available for us to train on, they would bring them back and allow us to train on them. But I'm excited to see a Tesla Semi in the wild. I have not seen one yet. Back in the day, when Nikola was still a company. Right now, there's only one Nikola employee, so I think technically it's still a company. But back in the day when there was Mini, they were testing the Nikola trays on the roads, and I saw those all the time. Speaking of Cybercab and Robotaxi, Reuters got their eyes on some California Department of Motor Vehicles records regarding Tesla and how many autonomous driving miles that they have logged and on California roads for 2025. So if you think back to 2025, Elon said at least twice that I know of, and I feel confident that it was more, but I will say at least twice, he said that they were basically waiting on California regulators to approve Tesla to start autonomous taxis in California without a driver. In California, Tesla and other autonomous taxi type companies have to report how many autonomous miles they've driven and tested each year if they want to be approved for if they want to actually operate an autonomous taxi in California. So Waymo has documented 13 million miles in California. I am going to ask you a question, and I'm going to hold and let you do your thing. But if I, knowing what you know about the company Tesla, who for a long time was based in California and who's been talking about at least twice recently that they're just waiting on regulators to approve this, how many miles did Tesla report in, how many miles did they log, autonomous miles did they log in 2025? And then a follow-up question to that, and I'm going to give you some time to think. How many autonomous miles has Tesla logged since 2019? Waymo documented 13 million miles. How many miles has Tesla documented? Give you a second. You got your answer? All right. For 2025, that number is 0. That is, according to Reuters, Tesla has documented 0 autonomous driving miles with the state of California. That doesn't mean that they have 0 autonomous driving miles. That means they've documented with the state 0 miles. That's for 2025. Now, the second part of my question was how many since 2019? That number is also 0. They have documented no autonomous driving miles with the state of California since 2019. Well, actually, that's not true. From 2019 to 2026 to current, 0. In 2016, they documented 562 miles. So since 2016, Tesla's only documented with the state of California 562 miles. Again, that does not mean that they are not testing it. That just means that's what they've documented. As of February 26, 2026, so just a week ago, Tesla has only obtained 1 permit from the state of California for autonomous driving, and that is like the entry-level permit to test autonomous vehicles. That's it. That's as far as they've gone, according to Reuters. And when I say that, it doesn't mean that they don't have something else. I'm just saying that's all Reuters was able to find. They weren't able to find additional permits. And Reuters is a very reputable place. And, the folks that work over there know how to research a story. They're not shooting from the hip like some rando on Twitter. So it's interesting that Waymo has 13 million autonomous miles documented. Why is Tesla so low? You would think that, 13 million miles, that's a lot. Does Tesla have to log, a million miles with the state? How many miles with the safety driver do they have to log before they can move on to that next step? Well, it turns out companies only need to have 50,000 miles with a safety driver, which is not a huge number, to be able to achieve that next step. So I'm saying this is a super low bar. Now, that doesn't mean once Tesla has 50,000 miles, that means that they can get a permit to start shuttling people around. That's not the case. But to get to that next step, they need at least, 50,000 miles to get there. We'll definitely keep an eye on this story and report as we learn more. It may be that Tesla's like, no, that's not true, and here's the reasons why. And if it's not true, we'll definitely make sure to mention it on the show. And our final story that has to do with Tesla, the vehicle program manager for Cybercab is leaving the company. Victor Nikita, hopefully I'm saying his last name right, it's Nechita, might be Nikita, is leaving the company just a few months before Cybercab production starts. He started as an intern on the Model 3 back in 2017, but has only been with the company, I think was said, for 6 years. So he must have been an intern, went back to school, finished everything up. But pretty impressive that he was, in 2017, an intern on the Model 3 production line and was the vehicle program manager by the time he left. That's a major project. That's very impressive. And here's the thing. There's a lot of hay when someone like this leaves, like somebody in either a critical position, like the vehicle project manager, or somebody in a much higher position that maybe in the C-suite. There's a lot of news stories that happen around when somebody leaves, and rightfully so. Why are they leaving? Why are they moving on? But just because a person leaves, it doesn't mean that the company is falling apart. And this happened very early on, quite a bit actually, when Tesla was a young company and they were always on the verge of going out of business. Anytime someone would leave, it was this huge big deal, and it was like it told the story of how the company was going to fail. That's not the case. Tesla is a huge successful company with over 100,000 employees. People are going to get offers, especially when you're in an important role like the vehicle program manager for Cybertruck, or no, Cybercab, excuse me. You're going to get offers to work at other companies, and those offers are going to be lucrative. And maybe you just want to change the scenery, or maybe you want more money and Tesla's not willing to give it to you, or maybe you've made enough and you you can be like, you know what, I'm gonna take a little bit of time off, because Tesla does have the reputation of being a company that you're going to work really hard. And if you're on vacation, you're probably still going to be working really hard. So maybe he just needs a break. I guess what I'm saying here is departures aren't always a sign of doom and gloom.
Nobody does selling better than Shopify. Shopify is the home of the #1 checkout on the planet. And the not-so-secret with Shop Pay that boosts conversions up to 50%, meaning way less carts go abandoned and way more sales going through. So if you're into growing your business, your commerce platform better be ready to sell wherever your customers are scrolling or strolling. On the web, in your store, in their feed, and everywhere in between. Businesses that sell more, sell on Shopify. Upgrade your business and get the same checkout that Skims uses. Sign up for your $1 per month trial period for 3 months at shopify.com/Westwood1, all lowercase. Go to shopify.com/Westwood1 to upgrade your selling today. Shopify.com/Westwood1.
Quick, choose a meal deal with McValue. The $5 McChicken meal deal, the $6 McDouble meal deal, or the new $7 Daily Double meal deal. Each with its own small fries, drink, and 4-piece McNuggets. There's actually no rush. I'm just excited for McDonald's. For a limited time only, prices and participation may vary. Not valid for McDelivery.
Dentists and dental professionals, this podcast is for you. Check out Thank You for Flossing from the Association of Dental Support Organizations, where we bring you candid conversations with the leaders shaping dentistry today. DSOs, technology, workforce challenges, policy shifts, and more. No fluff, just real insight from people building the future of the industry. Subscribe to Thank You for Flossing wherever you listen.
All right, before we move into our next clip, I just want to kind of give a shout out. So after I got back from CES, and I believe that I talked about this with everybody, I was able to go and check out this really cool AI robot chef, and it's called Nosh. It's letsnosh.io if you're interested in checking this out. But effectively what it is it has a spice rack that you put a bunch of different spices into, and then it has a tray that you put the ingredients into, and then it's got reservoirs for oil and water. And then it's got an inductive cooktop and a pot that comes with it. And you choose the recipe that you want to make. Obviously, it'll tell you all the ingredients that you need to put in. And each part of that tray where you put the ingredients has a number. So it adds the ingredients when it's time to actually add those correct ingredients, right? And the Nosh robot makes you the meal. And here's the thing, right? I love Indian food. So what Amit, who's the founder of the company, what he made for me was an Indian dish. So I had no problem with the food. Here's the thing that I was a little apprehensive about is that I don't really like meat as a general rule. I'm not a big fan of meat. And when I do eat chicken, I don't eat beef or pork. I do eat chicken. And when I had the opportunity to watch him putting all this stuff in the tray, he loaded the tray in, I noticed that the meat was dark meat, and I just cannot deal with the consistency of dark meat unless it's cooked the right way, and then it's okay. I know it's got more flavor and people prefer it, but for me, it's just not a thing that I do. Anyway, we were having a conversation. He was showing me how the whole thing worked, and when it was all done, He's like, do you want to cook this for a little bit longer? And my answer was yes, because I want the meat to be a little firmer because, again, I don't like the consistency. So we cooked it for 2 more minutes. The machine put all of the ingredients in where it needed to be, put all of the spices in where it needed to be. It was pretty amazing. And when it was all said and done, it tasted really good, including the meat. Like, I did not have that visceral reaction that I typically have when I have to eat dark meat. It was actually firm and tasty and like grade A. So Amit had mentioned to me that they were going to be going through Kickstarter. This is not a paid ad. I am not getting paid. I did not get offered a Nosh robot, AI robot. And what this is, it's not really a robot. It's a box that's slightly bigger than a microwave that sits on your counter. And depending on your microwave, it might be quite a bit bigger than a microwave, but it's not huge. But it sits on your counter and then it, makes your food for you. It's a super cool product. It does other things other than just Indian food. So I would highly suggest that you go and check it out. It's letsnosh.io, and I'll also put a link to the Kickstarter in the show notes. And I'm only doing this because I liked Amit so much. Like, this is not something that we would typically talk about on this show. Again, I am not getting paid a penny. I'm not getting paid anything other than he gave me free lunch the day that I went and met him for talking about this. And there was no expectations that I would talk about it when we met up and hung out. He's just a really cool guy. I want to see him succeed. And like I said, there's Italian food and Indian food, and there's over 500 different recipes for you to choose from. And they're only adding more. So I am very fascinated about this kind of stuff, and hopefully you are too. Okay, let's move into our EV news. Starting off, here we go. NIO. So NIO has signed an agreement with automotive parts company Bosch, and NIO's brands, which are NIO, Onvo, and Firefly, they will use Bosch technology in their EV tech. They're going to use their drive-by-wire system and their battery management system. So I thought that was interesting and worth noting. And then also, in February of 2026, NIO delivered a pretty decent number of cars. So just for a point of reference, in February 2025, they delivered 13,192 cars. 1 year later, they delivered 20,797 cars. Now, at that time, Onvo was pretty new. NIO was an established brand with years of sales behind them, but they didn't have the Firefly brand, which is the most affordable brand that they have. So that vehicle was out. I don't know what the mix was of the deliveries, but pretty good for NIO. That's a 57.6% increase year over year. This next story isn't really a story. It's just kind of a little mention here. We're going to finally hear about the final pricing for the Slate truck in June. So it's expected to come in the mid $20,000 range, but we'll see. So that probably should have gone up above the NIO story. And then this next story, this is a big thank you and shout out to Allison Sheridan for sending this along. And then also and Allison's been very public about this, but she broke her femur. And if you want to know more about what happened, go to the NosillaCast podcast, and I'll put a link of that in the show. I'm putting lots of links in the show, but I'll put a link to that in the show as well for you to take a peek at that. But Allison, and she sent me this, and I had a conversation with her yesterday, and I didn't find out until today, and she had already been convalescing at this point. But anyway, that's neither here nor there. I've explained how cross I am with her. Actually, I can never be cross with Allison. I love Allison. Anyway, Aptera announced that their first vehicle, has rolled off its low-volume validation assembly line. So this is a key step even, towards the production of their solar electric vehicle, the Aptera. So hopefully, fingers crossed, this car is actually going to be put into production, and we'll start seeing them on the roads. Like Aptera has had lots of delays over the years. And as a matter of fact, like Aptera is one of the reasons why I started this podcast. I know I've mentioned this several times, but when I saw their car for the first time, and it was like way back in the early 2010s range, maybe 2012, 2013, 2014, somewhere in that time frame, I watched a YouTube video of their car, and it basically looks like a fuselage for an airplane, like an ultralight without the wings. Like, it's a super cool looking car. And while I thought Tesla was really neat, my thing is at the time I couldn't afford a Model S, and Model X I don't think was quite out yet. And this Aptera car was supposed to be, relatively affordable. I think it was supposed to start in the $20,000 range. And I was like, oh, I can afford that. I can actually afford an electric car. It's only a 2-seater, but that's okay because most of the time I'm driving by myself. So I don't really need a big car all the time. But yeah, so I'm looking forward to Aptera being able to put this vehicle out, get through their validation process, and then start burning through some of those 50,000 reservations that they have that they say is worth over $2 billion in potential revenue. I'm really hoping to start seeing these on the road soon. They say that they're going to start delivering to initial customers later this year. So we'll see.
Nobody does selling better than Shopify. Shopify is the home of the #1 checkout on the planet. And the not-so-secret with Shop Pay that boosts conversions up to 50%, meaning way less carts go abandoned and way more sales going through. So if you're into growing your business, your commerce platform better be ready to sell wherever your customers are scrolling or strolling. On the web, in your store, in their feed, and everywhere in between. Businesses that sell more, sell on Shopify. Upgrade your business and get the same checkout that Skims uses. Sign up for your $1 per month trial period for 3 months at shopify.com/Westwood1, all lowercase. Go to shopify.com/Westwood1 to upgrade your selling today. Shopify.com/Westwood1.
Quick, choose a meal deal with McValue. The $5 McChicken meal deal, the $6 McDouble meal deal, or the new $7 Daily Double meal deal. Each with its own small fries, drink, and 4-piece McNuggets. There's actually no rush. I'm just excited for McDonald's. For a limited time only, prices and participation may vary. Not valid for McDelivery.
Okay, so our final story is a story about Donut Labs. We talked about Donut's first test of their battery last week, which is effectively a charging test. And now we are going to talk about the latest test on their solid state battery, which is a high temperature discharge performance test. I do want to say up front, we still don't know what the battery chemistry is, and we don't know whether it is in fact a solid state battery or not. We also need to state that these tests are done by VTT in Finland, which is a state-owned organization that tests these things. And then they say, did they do what the company said it did or not? And VTT is going to test these cells exactly how Donut tells them to. They're not going to do anything different. They're going to test them the exact way that Donut says. So here's my understanding of how the test went. Again, like I spent a good deal of yesterday just trying to learn about this stuff. This is all very, very new to me. So I'm hoping I've got all of this right. If I didn't, please write in and let me know where I went wrong, and I'll share that. So this is a discharge test. So one of the things that they do is they put some mechanical pressure on the cell. The cell is placed on a heat sink, and then a steel plate is positioned on top of that cell. And from my understanding, this has something to do with like simulating a battery pack. So it's got the mechanical pressure. There's different connections that are attached to the cell, and it's not a complete battery pack. It's just one single pouch cell. So there are current cables that are attached to the cell, and then there are voltage cables on just little alligator clips that are attached to measure the voltage. And then, of course, there's some temperature monitoring. And each test that's done, the cell is basically inside of an oven. So there's going to be a test at 20 degrees Celsius, which is room temperature, which is 68 degrees Fahrenheit. And then a test at 80 degrees Celsius, which is 176 degrees Fahrenheit. And then 100 degrees Celsius, which is 212 degrees Fahrenheit. And then each time, they were able to discharge and recharge the battery at these temperatures. So the first test, room temperature test, like I said, 20 degrees Celsius, 68 degrees Fahrenheit, the cell was charged at a consistent current of 24 amps until it reached 4.15 volts. Then the cell was left idle for an hour. So at 20 degrees Celsius, it's idle for an hour. And then it was discharged at 24 amps until it fell to 2.7 volts. And this was to determine the initial capacity of the cell. And then we went to the next test, which is 80 degrees Celsius, 176 degrees Fahrenheit. Charging was not done at 80 degrees Celsius. Charging was actually done at room temperature, and the discharge was done at 80 degrees Celsius. So it was fully charged. Then they brought the temperature of the oven, or whatever, we'll say oven for lack of a better word, to 80 degrees Celsius. And then they let the battery cell stabilize for 2 hours at that temperature. And then they discharged the cell at 24 amps down to 2.7 volts. The cell was allowed to cool again for an hour, and then they charged it back up at room temperature, not at, whatever temperature they were going to discharge it at. It was charged up at room temperature. So at 100 degrees Celsius, 212 degrees Fahrenheit, this is the temperature at which we boil water. Again, charging at room temperature. And then the chamber was brought to 100 degrees Celsius. It was, they let it stabilize for 2 hours, and they discharged at 12 amps until it reached 2.7 volts. Now, if you're like, well, 12 amps, the other two they did on 24 amps. Why is that? I don't know. And it doesn't seem like they told us why they didn't discharge at 24 amps, but they discharged at 12 amps until it hit 2.7 volts, and then they stopped. So half of the amps of the other two tests. They did allow the battery to cool to 20 degrees Celsius, and then they charged it up one more time, and they did their measurements from there. One thing that did happen is the pouch cell lost its vacuum on the 100 degrees Celsius test. And what's thought there is that the adhesive leaked and then the vacuum was lost. The battery didn't fail at this time, even though it could have. It didn't fail, and the internal chemistry continued to work, but it is worth noting that it failed. Now, it's worth mentioning that most liquid lithium-ion batteries perform worse as the battery gets hot. Like there's a range where the battery's the happiest, and then after that, it's just not so happy. And we know this because in the summertime in Arizona, that's reflected because it's like 120 degrees outside, and you lose range. And then in the wintertime, if it's super cold, that liquid electrolyte, the ions are moving very slow, and it doesn't like that either. So the fact that, this battery was able to withstand those heats, that's pretty good. To withstand that heat, that's pretty good. But then for this particular battery cell, when it got hotter, it actually performed better. Like the heat gave it a bit of a boost. So the test results showed room temperature, 20 degrees Celsius, normal performance. At 80 degrees Celsius or 176 degrees Fahrenheit, they got 110% of the capacity of that battery cell. And at 100 degrees Celsius, even though the battery cell lost vacuum at 100 degrees Celsius, they got about 107% capacity. So to make this very simple, the battery was able to deliver more usable energy when it was hot. Now, at some point in time, at 100 degrees Celsius, there was some failure in terms of the packaging for the battery, and we've lost, that's obviously not good long term, but that is interesting because, like I said, lithium ion batteries typically lose performance when the temperature increases, and then for different reasons, they lose performance when the temperature decreases. So that's really interesting. One of the things, though, some people are skeptical, and honestly, rightfully so. They have a right to be skeptical, especially if you are a battery expert or a battery engineer, you know, or just somebody who's been through this enough, like a podcaster who's been doing this for 10 years and seen a lot of promises and some of those promises not be fulfilled. The performance numbers are much higher than what we have in commercial EV batteries. The independent testing is good, but it's still limited, and we're only seeing a small picture of what's actually going on. And if this were me, and I was and I mentioned this last week, but if this were me and I was giving this, if I was doling out this information, I would give out this information with a story. And we're not getting a story. We're getting, here are the numbers, and that's it. And here are the numbers for this specific test, and that's it. And it's a very narrow perspective, which makes it hard because within certain, like if you have these constraints that you're showing people, that what they're going to want to know is, well, what happens when you go outside of that? Like you're not telling the whole story here. And eventually we might be told the whole story. Like, I'm not saying Donut's lying or trying to hide anything. I'm just saying the way that they're doling out this information leaves, in my opinion, a lot to be desired. People are also talking, and these engineers and battery experts are also questioning the long-term durability. This battery cell basically went through the room temperature, and then the next one was 80 degrees Celsius and then 100 degrees Celsius, and that was it. That doesn't prove anything about the durability of this battery, but that's not what they were trying to show in this test. So I give them a little bit of leeway on that. But these results are interesting. We just need more information before this technology can be confirmed. So while the early results showed that the battery worked even at extremely high temperatures and a vacuum failure, performance, increased when it got hot. There's still a lot of unanswered questions. And if you give somebody enough information to make up their own narrative, they will. And if you want to be the person who controls that narrative, then you should be the one telling the story. So that's all I'll say about that. So it's interesting, promising, but nothing has been fully proven yet. Okay, that is our whole show when it comes to announcements, Patreon supporters. Thanks again, Dean. The Final Lap, go check them out and see what they're doing with their NASCAR podcast. Go check out Whooshin', which is Kelly Murphy's podcast from the Final Lap, and see what he's up to. And then also check out Jill and Tom, who are hosting the Car Stuff podcast. You can also head over to the website, consumerguide.com. I'll put links to this all in the show notes. And then the Nosh AI robot, the AI chef, definitely worth checking out. And I'll put a link to not only to their website, but also to their Kickstarter. And yeah, now that leads us to a proud father moment, if I could just bend your ear one last time. So many of you know my oldest, Sierra. Sierra owns her own company. She's been quite successful at it. And, I'm proud of her for a lot of different reasons. And it's not just her success, but there's a lot of things that this kid does that I'm just super proud of. Sierra has been working on a video for her own personal YouTube channel. So normally she makes content for nonprofits and that kind of thing. In this instance, she was making something for her own channel. And she created a video recently and it's entitled Why Work is Starting to Look Medieval. And listen, number one, the video is amazing. It's about 17 minutes long. It is very well researched. It is very well produced. She's very good at what she does, right? But the video has blown up on YouTube. Like, it's been up for a little more than a day. She has 23,000 views. She gained over 1,000 subscribers in one day. She has 358 comments and over 2,300 likes on the video. And the comments are overwhelmingly positive. There's a few in there of haters or whatever, but in general, a lot of really, really nice comments. And she did a great job on the video. So if you search on YouTube, Sierra LeDuc, or Why Work is Starting to Look Medieval, you can check it out for yourself. Listen, at the rate that she's going, she doesn't need my help to boost the views or anything like that, but I am very proud of what she did, and I have shown it off to anybody that will listen or watch. So that's why I'm telling you now. So please go to youtube.com. Let's see. youtube.com. What is her channel? youtube.com/@ Sierra, Sierra LeDuc, LADUKE, and check out what she's doing because it's amazing. She is killing it, and she's got some other videos there that were not nearly as successful, but still just as good information there as you'll find in the Why Work is Starting to Look Medieval episode. And it's not it's not doom and gloom. It's actually a quite positive video. All right, everybody, that is it for me. If you want to send me an email, it's Bodie, BODIE, at 918digital.com. You can also find me on LinkedIn. It's Bodie Grimm on LinkedIn, BODIE, GRIMM. And I hope you all have a wonderful day. And I will talk to you soon. I'm actually going tomorrow. I'm going to drive a Lucid Air for an hour and a Lucid Gravity for an hour. I'm super stoked about it. And then on Friday's show, we will cover the Lucid earnings call because I'll actually have something more to add, I think, after driving those vehicles. And then next week, we have 2 really cool interviews, and I'll tell you about those on Friday. So thanks so much for listening, and I will talk to you soon.